Hello and welcome to the Unusual Stories podcast. My name is Wojciech Salski, I'll be your host for today. And before we begin, may I just remind you, if you find this podcast useful, entertaining, insightful, or anything at all that you believe is of value, then please do click the subscribe button below or a follow button depending on what platform you're watching it on, and share it with a friend. You know, it helps, it goes a long way. The word of mouth is the best kind of advertising, and as I'm keeping the podcast, on a low budget, sort of a bootstrap budget, it definitely helps to spread the message without me having to, buy out some Facebook ads and whatnot. So please do so right now if you will. And also, if you'd like to support the podcast in any other way, maybe by contributing towards it or sending me a little message or commenting, then please follow the link below. There is an option to basically subscribe to my newsletter, send me an email, and maybe suggest a book that I should review this year. It would be quite fun to hear what you guys would like me to read and explore. Of course, I have some ready, and I shall. It's a never-ending story, really. But I deeply appreciate all of you that have reached out already, and both kind words and gestures and funds that basically make this audible adventure of mine a more pleasant and fulfilling one. Not that it isn't pleasant already, but it definitely helps from time to time, especially when I feel slightly down, to remind myself why I'm doing it, and that it actually helps and benefits some people. So thank you for that, and I hope that that this episode yet again benefits you. And so here we are, yet again, second episode of the year. I was discussing with my girlfriend whether in what direction should I go with this episode, because I have some really, really exciting books for you this year. And one of them I've literally just finished today, and I was so excited to share it with you. But then we were discussing that it might be more beneficial, since it is the start of the year, to still, for maybe a week or two, continue with this theme of New Year's resolutions. And so, instead of sharing with you a book that is very exciting but not necessarily practical, for you in applying the knowledge from it and my thoughts to your New Year's resolutions and ideas, we've discussed and decided that I'll share with you yet again one more book that is definitely a practical one, and it's also very pleasant. And quite frankly, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, the title when I say it. I think I've quoted it by now 3 or 4 times, if not more. And I always am amazed that I've not done an episode about it yet. I literally had to double check today, go through all my episodes. By now there's almost 200 of them, so I did have to check to see that I've not truly created an episode about it. And so here we are. I think it's the best moment for it. It truly seems so, especially that it's one of those books that you can read it in no time, in one afternoon, maybe even more quickly. I would say, I don't know, I've read it 2 or 3 times, and it's literally a booklet very similar to Siddhartha in size. So I don't actually have it here. I left it at home in Poland, but it's one of those books that you can probably squeeze between your purse and your computer in your bag, and you won't even feel the difference. So the title of the book is The Richest Man in Babylon, and may I just confirm it is written by George S. Clason. And basically, as the title suggests, it's about becoming rich, right? And I know. Let's take a moment, hold our horses. We don't have to jump straight away into the sort of the rich adventures of absurd wealth and, really, really luxurious yachts and whatnot. We can start small, but the point of the book and the few lessons that I will share with you, the few bullet points that I will share with you and some thoughts about them are definitely very practical and very useful, and they have helped me immensely, right? So I've been on this journey of basically, first of all, discovering what money really is, and then understanding that there is more to it than just earning it at the end of the month and spending it throughout the next month and then waiting to the next sort of paycheck to arrive without really knowing what I'm spending it on, and truly growing my wealth. I'm definitely not yet where I would like to be. This is just the beginning of the road, but I have already seen great progress, especially in the spiritual sense, the way I feel about my safety, really, because financial safety and security is truly one of those pillars that hold us together, especially in times of distress, and also empowered understanding and seeing over time, because it has been by now almost 3 years that I've started this journey. What does it make me feel and expect and appreciate going forward? So, I'll link below the different episodes that we've already had about topics related to money and to wealth and to sort of developing good habits. So please bear with me, and I'm sorry if you've already heard some of these ideas, because quite frankly, they are quite simple and rather straightforward ideas if you think about them, and especially if you think about them often, then you've probably heard them a couple of times already. If you haven't, if this is your first sort of encounter with the wealth mindset and strategies for success in your financial resolutions and plans, then I think this episode and this book will be a great start for you. So the links below, I'll share with you later which exactly the episodes are, and I'll briefly sort of touch maybe which each of those episodes, what each of those episodes might mean for you. But for the time being, shall we start? So, yeah, I'd like to start first by basically telling you a little bit about my story, right? So if this is the first time you're exploring this concept with me, or maybe this is the first time you tuned into this podcast overall, I've traveled to Kuwait in 2022 and started working for a sort of a business magazine. Let's say I was a sort of a journalist. And right about that time, I've had a chance to meet a guy, a businessman from London, who was kind enough to sort of mentor me for a few months, really, I think more or less a year, in the idea of money making and basically saving and investing, because this is the major difference that I'll explore later as well, but maybe I can put foundation to this idea straight away. There is this thought that it doesn't really matter how much you earn, it's about how much you keep. So, you might be able to earn absurd amount of money, but if at the end of the month you're still waiting for the next paycheck, you're not actually wealthy. You're not financially stable, and you're not financially, secure. And even more so, you're not financially independent. And so obviously there are levels to this financial freedom, future, stability, and health. But at the very base level, the idea of saving and investing a part of what you earn, what you gather, what you produce, allows you to be safe in case of an emergency, and that's sort of the very foundation, the base of the base. And then everything above that, saved and invested successfully, can allow you over time to become your own boss, for example, or maybe even retire early, or level up your quality of life. And it's very aspirational, I would say. And I would like you to, most importantly, and maybe at some point I'll make an episode about the book by Jen Sincero, You Are Badass at Making Money. I would like you to set aside any preconceived notions you might have about being wealthy. You know, there are certain idioms and phrases that seem to go around our culture, maybe our environment, that might not be too beneficial for you if you truly want to improve your situation. You know, for example, if you consider people to be filthy rich, or you consider an obscene wealth, you know, putting these words together and sort of making them sound this way can truly hinder your subconscious perception of what does it mean for you to become a wealthy and financially healthy person. Anyhow, I'm sort of getting ahead of myself. So right about that time, 2022, I started sort of investing and saving, and most importantly, I became more aware of what I'm spending my money on. So I have this little spreadsheet that my father kindly created for me 3 years ago now, and I've been tracking almost every penny since. And I know this might not be for everyone. I might overdo it a little bit, so it's up to you. You know, all these ideas that I'm sharing with you, and some of them are quite personal, are shared here for your own benefit. You can take it or leave it. It's up to you. I'm not insisting that you do have to, as myself, track every little spend you make. But it does... It did revolutionize my perception of money and my ability to understand how much I'm saving, how much I'm investing, how much I'm spending. And so I would urge you to at least do a little review of this over some time. I often say, whenever I end up talking with some of my friends about this topic and they ask, you know, kind of what's the first step? I would say the first step is definitely understand what you're spending money on. So, you know, it's quite easy to point the space from which you're getting your financials at the beginning of the month, right? Or maybe at the end of the month, you know, for the previous month. It is much more difficult for people, it seems, to say where do their money, you know, where does their money flow to over that month or over that year. And even, you know, without being too crazy about this whole calculation, you can roughly estimate and track with your bank statement, or maybe with your, you know, app. You can track what you've been spending on and do this little exercise for yourself. If this is the first time you ever heard about this idea, then do this exercise if nothing else. Figure out how much you spend and on what over the, you know, an average month. Maybe it is beneficial to track it for a month or 2 or 3, to see also, you know, different stages, because obviously Christmas time will be a very different spending time than in the middle of spring, maybe. Or January might feel, as it definitely does for me, it might feel like a dip in spending in comparison to Christmas. And so these are the ideas that I started to play with since 2022. And so I became hooked. Like, I truly am fascinated by, first of all, the idea of money and you know, the vehicle it allows us to use, or it is. And definitely I feel much more empowered since starting this adventure and now seeing some results already, because it has been two years, almost 3, that I've been on this journey, seeing the results coming up and, the sort of the compounding effect of good discipline and consistency. And so this book is one of the books that I read very early on, and I made my younger brother read it. I read it again a couple of times, and I became fascinated with the topic ever since. And so the 3 main points that I'd like to share with you today are about, the first one is the power of saving and investing itself. And basically, we might as well get started. The first and most important part is to understand that no matter how much money you're earning today, whether you're earning, $10 an hour or whether you're earning $10,000 an hour, saving and investing 1/10 of that amount is possible. And if it doesn't seem possible for you right now, then once you review your expenses, you will be able to find the space where you can squeeze in that 1/10. And I am saying 1/10 on purpose because this is what the book, Richest Man in Babylon, suggests, which in my opinion is still quite a conservative estimate. For quite some time, especially in 2022, I aimed to save/invest around 20 or 30% of what I earned. Of course, depending on your life situation, these might not be viable, and that's completely fine. The point is, though, everyone can start saving and investing. It can go as little as 10 cents on the dollar or on the pound, right? And this is the first sort of step, I would say, apart from understanding what you spend on. And in the book, the way it is structured, it's written as if you're in the ancient Babylonian city, and you're basically exploring the amazing culture that was there back in the days, while learning these concepts from sort of a parable, stories, which is really beautifully written. Me and my friend Connor are really fond of the way it's structured, and it really does entertain, which I think is very beneficial, especially if this is the first time you're exploring this concept, which, let's be honest, not everyone is fascinated and excited to talk about money, finance, or, saving. I think saving out of them all is probably the most boring one, although I do find it quite fascinating. And so the first sort of point that I'd like to put across is that you can start no matter how much you're earning. And if you're right now convincing yourself that you cannot, or maybe you want to scream in my face that I'm wrong, and your situation is so dire that you cannot, address this in any other way than scream and be upset about it, then I would just say, read the book, think about it, talk about it with your loved ones, your family, friends, and see if there is no way that you can somehow alleviate some of that pressure and allow yourself to save/invest these 10 cents on the dollar, or 10 cents on the pound, or 10 groszy on złoty if you're in Poland. So the power of saving and investing basically allows you to, over time, as I said, become a sort of your own boss. A good way to put it is, if you consider, this is financial health in a nutshell, at least the way I see it. If you consider the situation, we're probably all employed here. And if you're not employed yet, at some point you will probably become an employee for some time, or maybe you will be the employer. And similarly, you will still need someone to either pay you money for your services or pay you because you're their employee and you're obviously serving them with some sort of quality work. It is a very different story if you are, for example, threatened to be dismissed from your job, when you have a financial cushion that you can sort of fall back onto, or even more so, when you have enough saved and invested that you don't worry that tomorrow you will not go to work and earn so you can spend the day after or the month after. And this is a very big power that I've definitely sort of feel most inspired about. I aim to, in the future, in the probably quite a future, but still a future, I'd like to be more independent in that sense. And it's very difficult to be independent if you rely on this job to keep you afloat. Now, even more so, it's a very different story, for example, in negotiations, when you can walk away from the table and when you cannot. If you cannot walk away from the table because, for example, you have a huge mortgage and you need to pay every month and you don't have anything saved, then whatever the circumstances and expectations of the other party may be, you will probably be forced to take them, right? You will be sort of put in a corner without a choice. And so you are not actually negotiating if you have no power to negotiate, right? It is a very different story if you do have something, set aside and, numbers. What's the point of, deciding which numbers are correct? I've heard so many of them. Some people say that you should have an equivalent of 6 months pay in your sort of rainy day fund. Some people said it's 3 months. Some people said it's 3 years. Pick your poison, I think. It doesn't really matter. The point there is that if I were to lose my job tomorrow, touch wood, I should be able, from the financial health standpoint, I should be able not to worry about it because I have a financial cushion, and I can rest assured that while I'm looking for the next employment, or maybe I'm starting my own business, I will not be going hungry, homeless, and so forth. Now, of course, this is a very different story if you are already homeless and hungry. Going from that position, you will first start to amass some money and wealth to even start thinking about the financial security. But I think these extreme conditions are not necessarily the right ones to discuss in this particular episode. The major and a fun little quote that I've written down here for you from the book, and then sort of driving the point home, is it also shows in what text the book is written, is: a part of all you earn is yours to keep. It should not be less than a tenth, no matter how little you earn. And something very powerful that I remember, I think it was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which I've already made an episode about, talked about, is there is a huge power in paying yourself first, Of course, if you're an employee, then the government already got some of your taxes before your pay even hit your bank account, which is fair enough, we cannot change that. But there is some psychological power in this, maybe in this arrangement, in first paying yourself, maybe by putting it on a savings account, maybe buying some assets for this tenth of your pay, before you start paying all the other expenses of the month. So, for example, what I do is, of course, even though I do pay my rent on the first day of the month, I make a point of first putting that little, sometimes more, aside onto my savings account and other, investment vehicles that I've listed before in our episode Let's Talk About Money. which feel free to explore, before I pay that rent. And I would encourage you to do it too. Maybe in the spirit of this book, remind yourself that a part of all you earn is yours to keep, and ensure that that part becomes yours and stay yours, because as you remember, it is not how much you earn, it's how much you keep that makes you either rich or poor over time. Now, in terms of over time, I, yet again, and this is so funny, I feel like if you were to, I don't know, maybe you disagree. Tell me, especially if you're a long-time listener, maybe you know more than me. We're sometimes so stuck in our ways that we don't see ourselves the way we truly are. I hope I'm quite aware of myself though, but who knows. I feel like this whole podcast and the message that I share with the world could be compressed into the two words consistency and discipline. It seems to me it's probably the most common topic that I pick up every now and then, and it's definitely one of those topics that my friends are probably bored of me talking about whenever we end up talking about habits and ideas to improve life and whatnot. And there is a place for that in the book as well. The role of discipline and consistency, and especially the role of compounding your wealth over time, compound interest and compounding phenomena, is one of those things that I truly wanted to also bring for you to the table at the beginning of the year. A year is a long time. Someone wise once said that people greatly overestimate what they can do in a year and greatly underestimate what they can do in 5. And I don't want you to feel discouraged in planning your year. I have every year for the past 4 or 5 years made plans in my year that are barely meet. I usually fall short of them simply because they are just so grand, slightly too grand sometimes. But the point here is to aim up, right? And the great point about being disciplined and consistent, especially with such things as saving, investing, health and working out, reading, maybe if you want to read more and whatnot, or learning, and growing as a person. Consistency, this is one of my favorite quotes. I don't know who is it from, but I've heard this and I have it written down and everywhere. Consistency beats talent every day. It's one of those things, if you place 2 people in a race of a sort, and one person will work consistently, a little each day, while the other is, having these spurs of motivation and then long spurs of not doing anything, over time, the one that is consistent about their effort will win. It's just a matter of time. It might take longer than a year, and this is the whole point of overestimating a little bit what you can do in a year. But I would like to urge you to consider a year still is a long time. I would argue it's long enough for you to change any habit you want, and it's long enough for you to become financially healthy, whatever that means to you. The thresholds might vary. If you want a certain level of life, your financial health will be of a certain expectation, and if you want a different level of life, that expectation might change. The point is, though, consistency and discipline is what will make your efforts over time manifest. After going to the gym once, you will not see the results. After going to the gym 3 times, you're unlikely to see any results. After going to the gym 3 months, 3 times a week, I promise you, unless you're going to the gym and just sitting there on your phone, you will see results. And the only difference between that and making your savings/investing budget bigger is whether you actually do it. It is the same mechanism. Compound interest really works. And, this is not a podcast and this is not a financial advice podcast or an education in a sense that I'll tell you what to do with your money. I don't really care. It's up to you. I think there is a huge power in understanding and learning about this first, so you can make those informed choices. But whatever you will do with it, as long as it starts working for, sort of multiplying whatever investment you place it in, that is a consistent and sort of working towards your goal basis, you will see results over time. And I promise you, in 2 years' time, you will not want to stop. Probably in a few months' time, if you reframe the mind of yourself and most importantly, stop thinking about becoming rich as something that it should be despised, rather as something empowering, especially that with more money you will be able to do more great things and help more people, then I bet, I can literally take that bet, then if you do this in a few months' time, if asked, you would turn to me and say, yeah, I'm much more happy about my state of affairs in the financial front. And that would mean something, It definitely meant to me, and it still does. I feel very empowered and very aware of just how far I can go with those little each day, little each month contributions toward my future. Because ultimately, if you think about it, what money is a vehicle that allows you to take the production and effect of your effort today and transfer it into the future, and similarly transfer it to another person or another effort somewhere else. Now, I truly, I'll read the quote for you first, and then I'll say about the wisdom. So the quote here that I've taken from the book for this part is that what each of us calls our necessary expenses will always grow to equal our incomes unless we protest to the contrary. And this is the important part about the discipline, right? As I said earlier, I would like you to understand, based on these, ideas and books, I would like you to first understand what you're spending your money on. And you cannot save 10% of your income if you spend it. So it sort of goes without saying, but I guess one should say it. Disclaimer is, you need to save it, right? You need to save/invest it. You cannot spend it. If you're spending it each month and then, at the end of this year, you come back to me saying, Wojtek, I feel like this advice was a bunch of crap. I basically, every month I decided to save, and I'm going to ask you, and did you? And you're going to say, no, I actually had this expense and that expense and this expense and that expense. Well, all of them might sound necessary, but if all of them are necessary, then basically you're not considering your financial health and future growth of your wealth necessary. And I would argue that's just poor prioritization on your front. So being consistent is what makes it happen over time, and the compounding interest basically, what it basically does, especially if you put it into a certain fund that allows you to get interest on your money. So, long story short, simply put, let's imagine that you place $100 each month on a certain investment vehicle. Let's say that the interest rate on that vehicle is 10% a month, just for the sake of it. This means that every month of that $100, 10% will be added on top of that $100 into your fund. Moreover, if you keep investing more each month, maybe you put $100 each month to those initially placed $100, over time, this growth becomes slowly but surely exponential. Basically, the first time the interest is paid, you will earn $10 on $100. But few times down the line, and all these additional interest payments that you get, you will see your account grow in a way that you would not probably expect unless you've researched this idea before. And I would urge you, I'll put a link below. I'll actually write it down for you. I'll put a link below to an exemplary website that allows you to sort of calculate your compounding effect, compound interest of your investment, whatever it might be. And of course, this can be just an exercise, a mental exercise that you do for yourself just to motivate yourself to do so. I remember I did. Obviously, it doesn't mean that that's exactly what's going to happen, but I can promise you that if you are consistent and disciplined about it, you will see a very similar, if not the same result as this calculator might suggest. It just depends on the timeline and the amount of money you place and sort of effort you put. Now, the one thing that I'd like to highlight here, and we recently had a few interesting books about this. One of them was called The Sovereign Individual, and the other one was The Creature from Jekyll Island. And in those episodes, I've discussed the idea that banks and sort of banking industry is taking advantage of money, vehicle, and of us as its users in many ways. Now, compound interest effect is a double-edged sword. Like everything, right? Everything in life really could be considered a double-edged sword, especially if there is a benefit to you from doing something, then there is probably a benefit to someone else from doing that to you. And this is exactly what happens with interest rates on a mortgage, maybe by a bank. So if you don't know how a bank works, long story short, a sort of a simple explanation in context of this compounding effect is the reversal of what I've just described. So let's say it's not your money that you've invested to earn interest on it and to sort of save, invest for the future. Rather, it's a money you borrowed from the bank. And so let's say you borrow $100 this month, and the interest rate is $10. So a tenth. Now this means that next month you don't owe the bank $100 anymore. Now you owe them $110, right? Now you can imagine what happens next. If each month 10% is added on top of what you owe, then you might find yourself, for example, after 6 months, paying off almost double of what you initially borrowed. And it is the very same system, just reversed. Instead of you earning interest on your investment, it's the bank earning interest on you as their investment. And this is a very important concept to grasp, because if you consider how rich banking industry is, you can truly understand how rich you can become by basically playing the same game. And in and of itself, this game is not good or bad. It's literally just a phenomena that happens. It's a calculation, Can we say that mathematics is bad or good? I would argue not really. Nothing is good or bad. It's what we make with it, right? And so this part of the discipline and consistency is definitely something that for me is not only inspiring and empowering, but also worrisome in a sense that I am reluctant to jump in and take credits, borrow some money from the bank exactly for that same reason. Similarly, if you borrow from other institutions, maybe not so big and established. Now, this is the final point and the most important one. I sort of skipped it earlier, thinking maybe discipline and consistency, but you cannot skip this one truly. You need to educate yourself. And in the book, the story goes, and this is the I'll share a quote in a second. Many stories in the book point out to the idea that unless you educate yourself enough to be able to discern good proposition from bad and good situation from bad and sort of, opportunity wise and whatnot, unless you understand the rules of the game, you're basically likely to get burned whatever you will do. Because remember, there are as many people in the world that are wishing you well as many people in the world that are wishing you bad. If anything, I probably would lean towards the fact that there are more people being indifferent plus wishing you bad than those actually wishing you good. It's a very valuable and almost priceless, if not priceless, feeling and sort of security one has from those that truly do wish oneself to be happy, healthy, and all well. If you don't educate yourself about your finances, someone else will be earning from your ignorance. As we say again and again, ignorance is not bliss. It may be a short-term bliss because you're basically sort of willfully blinding yourself and hoping for the best. But we all know that over time, walking around without looking might, get us in trouble. And this is very, very, very true, especially with finance. I have no doubt that over the span of your life, you will have some hiccups about it. I know I did. And that's completely fine. It's normal. That's how we learn. There is no point in, sort of overwhelming yourself with being upset about it. You just have to move on, learn from the failure and keep forward. But the point of learning and educating yourself about this topic is to at least know when someone's wishing you well, right? For example, if you don't know what your employee is supposed to do for you, how can you tell if they're doing their job correctly? This is a very important and rather straightforward idea. If I have no clue whatsoever, how does a good investment look like? How can I tell if my investment manager wishes me well and decides well for me? This is not to fully discourage you from seeking advice. Of course, you don't have to be as passionate about finance like myself, and so you can seek other people rather than invest on your own accord and sort of devour the books that I'm devouring for it. But I would still argue there is a certain minimum limit that you should understand before you take any decisions and allow others, most importantly, to take decisions for you with your money. And that is a very troubling scheme if you put yourself there, because it is not obvious that a funds manager's interest correlates with your interest. For example, there is a pervasive problem in the investment sort of niche sphere that it so happens that servicing fee, management fee in some companies comes from the manager's activity on one's funds. So for example, every time I click a button on my screen to move your money from one investment vehicle to another, I charge you a small fee for it. Well, wouldn't it then be possible that some investment managers will decide to click more than necessary so they can earn more from those clicks, And I would even ask yourself, how sure you are, how safely can you say that if placed in that position, you wouldn't decide to click a few more times than need be? And this is the whole problem of not knowing. If you truly have no clue whatsoever, what does it mean to have a good investment? What does it mean to save well? Where does your money go? How can you discern between the good options and bad options with any sort of security? Now, the quote for this part of the book is, "Gold flees the man who would force it to impossible earnings, or who followeth the alluring advice of tricksters and schemers, or who trusts it to his own inexperience and romantic desires in investment." And as you can hear here, the point the author is making is even more sort of grave. If we allow ourselves to follow the advice of tricksters and schemers, or if we invest in vehicles, things, ideas that are impossible to work out, and a good part about knowing something about it is you have a greater chance of recognizing if something is completely impossible, you're less likely to lose that money. And I bet that you've had a chance in your life, and if you haven't yet, I bet you will, that you might lose that money that you have, or some of the money. I know I did, and I actually shared it on the podcast a while back, and I'm still paying the consequence for it. And it was very much so this romantic desire, emotional drive, and being basically tricked. And I do consider myself to be a fairly intelligent person, and yet they managed to basically trick me. So, truly no one's safe in that regard. And the only way for us to bulletproof ourselves, at least, partially, is to learn more. Knowledge is power, especially knowledge that you can apply. And so I would urge you, if this is one of your decisions, and I know it is for me and my girlfriend in terms of financial success, if financial health and improving of your financial situation is one of your New Year's resolutions, then this is definitely one of those books you can start with. And as I said, I'll put the links below to the few more, but for the time being, to drive the point home, become the kind of person that can not only know what is good and bad in this regard, but also apply this knowledge and then be consistent enough to see the results of it. And this is with all your other habits that you might be picking up this year. And I cannot stress it enough. You will not see results if you take only a week or 2 weeks or even a month to apply new habits. People do dry January. That's great, but to be honest, 1 month without drinking is not enough to see the results of not drinking. It's probably just 1 month that you refrain from going out as much. And obviously January is the best month for it because everyone is broke from Christmas craziness. This is not to discourage you from doing dry January, but I would argue that if you truly want to, kick a habit for some time, then do it at least for 3 months. I found that 3 months is usually the amount of time it takes for me to get used to doing things, become comfortable with them, and start seeing the results. And this last part is the most important one, really, because what better way to convince yourself that this is the way to go than to try and see the results? And you can take this advice at face value. And I hope, if you're listening to this and you find it interesting, then I hope that this truly becomes a value for you to take. But until you see your own results, you're really unlikely to wholeheartedly, sort of embrace this new phenomenon of becoming financially healthy, wealthy, and potentially even over time financially independent. That's where I'm heading, hopefully. So now, before I give you the invitation, I just wanted to put below the little, sort of disclosure of which books and which episodes I'll share with you in the links below. Now, if you'd like to learn about Bitcoin as an investment vehicle and maybe a store of wealth, then please check out the Bitcoin Standard book, and the link below is there for you for the episode. And Let's Talk About Money, that's the episode I've initially created about finance a while back, and I'll definitely, I couldn't recommend enough maybe starting there if you found this episode useful. Sovereign individual is a more broad idea of becoming independent as a human being, and there's definitely a lot there about financial systems and the impact it has on our life, basically. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That's one of those books that you can read and reread, and in a way, I guess it's similarly to Alan Carr's Easy Way to Quit Smoking. I suppose it's sort of an NLP kind of method. You're supposed to train your subconscious to think different about money, and it's definitely one of the books that made a huge impact on me, and I read it 3 or 4 times by now. And then Financially Independent is one of the earlier episodes that I've done discussing this topic, and it's definitely worth a check if you're interested. Now, as I said as well, I'll put the link below to a compounding interest calculator, so you can do a little of your own experiment. And my invitation for you for this week and for this year is to take the first or the next step. If you're not at all aware of your financial situation, then probably the best first step would be to write down all the expenses that you're making over the month and all the sort of income that you're obtaining, and seeing if that even makes sense. If you are already at that stage, if you know where your money goes and where it comes from, then I would urge you to start putting aside 10% at minimum. And ideally, because of inflation, which we've discussed before in the Bitcoin Standard and Let's Talk About Money episode, because of inflation, I would not... I would discourage you from just keeping that money on your savings account. Rather, I would urge you to start learning about ways to invest your money in other places, and basically to make your money work for you while you sleep, which is a really cool concept. If you're at that stage already, if you have something saved and you're looking for investments, then this is the part where your education and exploring different ideas will definitely play a huge part. And one thing that I'll just remind you about, which is a very basic concept but so important, is to diversify. Never, in terms of your health, financially and otherwise, never put all eggs in one basket, in a sense that you might think like you're completely right, and maybe 99% of the time you are, but the world is unpredictable, life is unpredictable, and the last thing you want is to see all your savings disappear because you made the wrong choice. And so, I've diversified my portfolio, which is very small one, humble one, but nevertheless it is one, across 4 different sort of financial assets. And this allows me to at least feel slightly more comfortable in a case something goes south in one of them. You can diversify as much as you want. Truly, you can have 90 different ways of investing. So pick your poison, pick your weapon, let's say. And any other of the steps, I guess, read the book and find out. I was thinking whether I should give you the 7 points that the book makes about making money, but I don't think that would be that beneficial, because basically that would mean that you don't have to read the book. And also it would mean that in a way I take away from you the pleasure and value of exploring that particular book and its concepts in a way it was made to be explored. And I wouldn't be surprised if, because of the way it is written, you will actually have a better understanding and more pleasant one of these rules and ideas than that from a Polish man talking in English from an Edinburgh I don't know what it is, room. I guess it's slightly bigger than a wardrobe, so let's make it a room. So yeah, I hope that that these these ideas and this invitation and these challenges will kickstart your year. And I truly wish you to achieve your financial goals for this year. And may I just remind you, be specific about your goals, be consistent about them, be disciplined, and you will see results. I am 100% sure of that. And I'm looking forward to hearing about some of those. So if you want to share something that you employed in your life since you've been listening to the podcast and you find that you useful and maybe entertaining, then please let me know. I'm keen to hear what's up with you. Other than that, as per usual, may I just remind you, if you've not yet clicked the subscribe button, then please do. It takes only a moment, and if you're gonna be here back, you might as well do so. And that way the podcast grows and we can even become bigger and more of a show, I guess, for people elsewhere. It basically increases the visibility of the podcast. And if you'd like to support the podcast in any other way, please feel free to follow the link below. Other than that, as per usual, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.